we could Korea's ass American style. And RDV, all I gotta sit there and say is, remembering Best of the Best as a kid growing up in the 80s.
I
remember, a good film. It's not a good film at all. But it's popular and people like to talk about it. I can say that.
I remember loving it as a kid, but now I watch it again. I'm just like, what happened?
I'll tell you what happened. Besides growing up, the thing with Best of the Best with Eric Robarts, and we're not even talking about the 3 other sequels that happened that he wasn't a part of. It really has what I mentioned before in our Extreme Movie Show reviews of 80s action films, that you have this pattern. And when we first started doing Chuck Norris movies, we talked about the Chuck Norris template, his pattern of what would happen in a film. And we loved it. We ate it up. We digested it. It was great stuff. Seagal had his. JCVD had his. But in the 80s in general, there's a way to construct a movie, put it together, slap stuff together, and it would work. Best of the Best is one of these films. You have a group of people getting together to do something, and what better than For America? I mean, seriously, especially in the 80s. You get to see a little bit about each one of them. It's completely schlocky with a bunch of hokey nonsense in it. Then you see them go through some stuff. Of course, there's a bar fight. There's a training sequence, a.k.a. montage, not quite. And then there's the fight where, despite losing, they really win in the end, because in the end, that's all that matters, is America and America coming out on top. And any of you call me bastards listening don't like it tough. That's how it was, at least in the 80s. People don't make films like that anymore. So yeah, let's start off, RDV, talking a little bit about Eric Roberts. When you think of Eric Roberts, what do you think of, RDV?
Well, considering I haven't seen Eric Roberts in really much that I can recall, other than Justified being his last thing I saw him in, where he played, I think he played an FBI agent in there. I think of these are the guys who were doing the movies that Chuck Norris and Jean-Claude Van Damme and Seagal weren't already doing. He was more. I don't want to call him a low budget actor, but he did the more out there projects, the ones that weren't as popular. But he's not a bad actor. I think it's just the scripts that he chooses. It's just, you can tell that they're very low budget.
Do you know how many actual credits he has to his name?
Probably as much as Nick Cage, more.
Well, I'll put it to you this way. Eric Roberts is one of those guys that decided he would basically, if you cut him a check, he will star in your thing. It's over 600.
Jeez.
And a lot of them are a lot of small parts. A lot of them are,
cameos.
And little straight to DVD, video on demand type stuff, even Hallmark stuff, Lifetime, all those kinds of things, stuff that you would never see. And you know what? He's in his mid-60s. He's aged well, it seems like. But he was a guy, to your point, we're not knocking when we say he's a B or C level actor, like somehow he sucks. It's just that the A-level A-listers in the 80s was this elite group of people, and it was hard to break into it. And they were action stars. Your B-level people might be people who could carry something, but maybe weren't considered leading men or leading women. Then you have your C-levels where you go, oh, this dude or that dude or whatever. And Eric Roberts has very successfully done all this. And I will tell you this. I had seen this as a kid, don't remember much of it, but everything I've seen with Eric Roberts since then, I actually was mildly impressed by going, you know what? His Muay Thai, his kind of moves in here looked kind of okay. And, the action in here there's a fair amount of it. It's not great, but it's, 80s fight. You have the bar fight, big scene in there that goes on too long. But then you have the big fight at the end where each, 5 members of the American team going up against the Korean team. There's some, obviously, camera misses or whatever, but for the most part, it doesn't look too sped up. And everything we've talked about that we like with practical effects and practical action scenes, we have. So Eric Roberts looks believable in the role, as well as the other guys in it. And some of the guys on the Korean team especially, they really look like they knew what they were doing. They looked almost too good compared to the American team. So I got to say that for Best of the Best, you could say, oh, yeah, I remember this movie. It was whatever. And then you watch it and you're like, really?
The thing that really drew me out of this movie is his hairstyle. I got flashbacks as a samurai cop.
Oh, yeah. And this is late 80s, so this is absolutely exactly what it was
like the long hair, and someone who's doing karate and stuff, you usually want to not have that.
Not in the 80s, bro.
No, especially '89. People were getting rid of that.
That mullet power is very strong.
No,
It was
yeah, in
incredible.
certain some areas, but not really up where I am. It's just like so you don't see that. I think that's probably made like in California or Florida maybe, but
Yeah, definitely.
it
Down
was
here in
it was
Florida.
dying out. But mid '90s there was no mullets really.
Yeah, and the thing with Best of the Best is, it starts off with him, and he's it looks like he's a single dad, which we never get, and we don't have enough scenes of males being shown in a positive light,
Yep.
teaching his child how to ride the bike. Look, I'm riding by myself. So of course the kid's gonna get whacked by a car. It's so predictable from the get-go. And his wife was widowed, and blah blah blah. He's got the injury that he has to overcome, and it's cheesy, it's hokey. You're like rolling your eyes. But I think a difference between a movie like Best of the Best versus, say, No Retreat, No Surrender is both movies, while to me almost kind of the same, where they're different is No Retreat, No Surrender. They tried to be kind of goofy. It was a bit of a slapstick buddy comedy thing. This movie here tried to take itself a little seriously on such a small budget, and I think they didn't overdo it enough where, despite all the hokey stuff in there, that scenes wise, like the ice cream cone falling, all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's cheesy. But I think they try to take themselves a little bit seriously, and it almost helps them here. There's not so much goofiness.
They also brought in some star power. They brought in James Earl Jones, too.
Yes.
Try to it being his Frank Cuso, coach. We actually didn't do a bad job. He did what James Earl Jones does. That's just kind of shtick. He's like more. It's like getting Morgan Freeman. We're getting whenever he signs up for a role.
Right.
So James Earl Jones delivered in this. Philip Ree, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. He's actually a Korean martial artist. He's in the movie. He plays Tommy.
Yep.
He actually was really good in this. So I mean, he's probably applied to me with probably the more authentic when it came to like the fighting stuff, as far as for being the main stars, more so than Eric. We also had Chris Penn in here too.
Yes, early Chris Penn, for those that care, as well as Ahmad Rashad, sports broadcaster who'd been around for a very long time. He had a lot of airtime in there. He's the African American announcer at the end who's going on everything, and he's actually sporting a little bit of a mustache, which I was like, oh, Ahmad, I don't remember if you had that or not. Yeah.
Yeah, he's usually the thug, or a comic role in a movie. That's usually what he's known for.
Well, here's the thing with this film, too. A couple more things about it. Despite the fact that it produced several sequels, which Eric Roberts, like I said, wasn't necessarily a part of, one of the main dudes is, and so that's kind of cool. It's always neat that, like in the 80s, whenever you had your big blockbuster films we always talk about, you also had a lot of very smaller films like this that you could go see. And there's this great variety in the 80s of films that you could check out and like. And while films might have been considered the best in the 70s with experimental themes and techniques and that sorts of stuff, in the 80s you definitely got a very canned, hashed, very sanitized product put out there. And while some movies are really big, people love today, like E.T. and Star Wars and all that, sometimes there's a backlash to just how poppy those films are, because frankly a lot of them I don't care for. But when you have a film like this, which is not a good film by any instance, watching it, you know exactly what's going to happen. It's extremely predictable. Sometimes we don't care, and it can still be entertaining. This movie has a certain tone to it that when you're watching it, you go, I'm buying that tone. It is like the adult, more serious version of No Retreat, No Surrender. And so a lot of people that are in martial arts kind of like it, because instead of being a goofy thing running around with your buddy doing Bruce Lee crap like in No Retreat, No Surrender, you've got this movie where it's like, no, it's not about me, it's about country and it's about my team. And when you have James Earl Jones being the really hardcore coach, who just happens to be 100% right all the time, he's believable in it. And also, it's very hard in the 80s to not suggests there were very big sports films that people really loved, such as Hoosiers, that really captured what it was like to be on a team and how important sports were at that time before the 90s and things started changing in professional sports. So I think this film did a really good job of kind of capturing that a little bit, even as cliche it is with the bar fight with Chris Penn, his character, was it Travis? Travis is making comments about stuff that, you know, people would say, oh my God, that's so racial today. You know, back then it was like, it was just an offhand comment where people kind of learn, you know, I'm going to overcome my bigotries and my, you know, whatever thoughts and feelings I might have had about somebody individually or collectively as a race. Again, it is so obvious, you know, but it works.
And that's the thing, back in the day, you know, if you said something like that, you know, not realizing, you know, what it is, your friends would correct you, hit you over the head and call you an idiot, and then you'd learn.
Yeah.
You know?
Now, the end of the movie, of course, has the big fight. I think it's every 3 years they noticed the World Karate Championships. So you got your team of 5 of the Americans versus the Koreans, and of course, one of the Koreans had killed one of the Americans' bros, you know, in combat, and so we get, you know, flashbacks to that and everything. But what I like about this ending here, and actually a lot of the movie is not a lot of busy scenes. It's just a few lights, some people packed into an audience, and you're really watching the fights. You get one-on-one matchups. There's plenty of time given to these fights here at the end, and they do a point and or knockout scoring system. So if you were a Korean and you were whipping my ass, you know, I could knock you out, and, you know, that would be a big plus. Or if you just totally thrashed me, it wasn't counted as the match. You just accumulated points over a time period. So of course you could have a big win at the end. What's cool is after everybody goes through their fights, Eric Roberts goes next to last, and he gets his shoulder messed up, and he's got some great lines in there too, because he's a super sensitive guy, despite he's got this menacing sort of look to him, and he's not the biggest guy in the world either, but he's like, I'm gonna kick your ass, and a few other things too.
He's like the
bad shoulder, and it gets popped out, and he's like, pop it for me, I'm going back in. It's like, oh my goodness, but people eat that shit up, and it's good because he delivers doing it.
The way to describe this, Eric Roberts, how he looks there, he looks like the low budget Steven Seagal with that ponytail. All he needs is a toothpick in and to talk a little slower.
This is more of a mullet rather than the ponytail, and that's a very distinguishable difference for the 80s. I know what you mean though, but at first I was like, Eric Roberts used to move like this back in the day. Hey, looks okay, but they end up having their fight, and there's some cool shots in there too. But his buddy, who goes in the number 1 spot in the heavyweight or light heavyweight spot, goes up against their number 1. And that fight's kind of brutal. There's 1 or 2 camera scenes where you kind of see where they're missing contact, like with the face, like with a kick or whatever. And I'm not going to say it's totally believable, all the stuff, but it is brutal. It does go back and forth. And there's a great scene where, you know, even though America's down and they don't have much time, they either have to get a knockout or because they're not going to score enough points to win. The guy in the lead's getting ready to go up there, and he's got his ass beaten. He's beating the other dude's ass, and he's like, you have to have a knockout. And he's like, I'm going for it, and he goes in there for it, and he gets this look on his face, and everybody on his team kind of stops, and they're like, no, don't do it, coach. He'll kill him, because this is the dude that killed his bro in combat. So if one more real blow would have killed him in the combat. So the American team lost the match because they didn't want their partner to do something he'd regret and kill somebody in combat, despite the fact he had blood killed in combat. And so America loses. They're runners up. They go through the trophy ceremony and all that. But the Koreans, because we massively kicked their ass American style, decided, you know what? I respect you and honor you for what you did for not doing that. Here, take my medal. It is so bogus, retarded, over the crap nonsense. That's the 80s, and it's pure America style. And you buy it, and you're like, okay, I get it. And then after that, the way you are supposed to end all 80s movies, immediately go to credits. You don't have to do anything, no little...
Nope.
2 minutes afterwards or 6 months later, none of that kind of stuff.
Or you get the Rocky where it's slow motion stop, you know.
Xtreme. Yeah. No, I don't know how or why Best of the Best inspired a lot of people, but it did. It's one of those things where in the 90s, you know, when you forget about the 80s and you're busy doing stuff. Oh, there's another Best of the Best. Oh, it came out to video. Oh wait, a few years later, is that the same Best of the Best, or is there a third one? Really? There's 3 of them?
There's 4
Why
of them.
didn't it come? Yeah, well, I know, but it's like you didn't know because every few years they do it. And the best part of Best of the Best is they're talking about remaking it. What about a female Best of the Best? Amy Johnston apparently just got married. Put her in it. What do you think?
That's the thing, though. We already seen Lady Blood fight, so I wouldn't mind seeing another, Best of the Best tournament. Like I said, I love martial art tournament movies when they're believable. I don't like when we have like I guess like I don't want to piss all over Mortal Kombat, but that's a video game thing. That's not something you take serious. That's like fantasy. I like Lady Blood fight seemed more believable because you had actually girls fighting against girls. You had the one girl who was like the more superior than the other ones. Where the other ones are kind of like weren't serious. The other one was ruthless. So I wouldn't mind seeing that. I said I would love to see reboots of the kickboxing movies, of blood sports. With a woman, and like I said, and now I'm gonna tell you anybody who thinks that because there's a woman in a reload does not necessarily mean it's woke. If you're trained to think that way, you're gonna look for that stuff. Because all I care about is the fighting. I don't care about the story. If you're there for the story, then I don't know why you're there for story. If it's about kickboxing or about that stuff,
well, I would totally disagree with you on that because one of the greatest movies of all time, Rocky, is not a boxing movie. It's about the story, and I still think you have to care about the characters. And despite how schlocky in here the characters presented, at least the main one we spend most of the time around with, Eric Roberts, we do kind of care about him. We understand him, so it's believable, and it carries that going in there.
The thing is that Rocky's never going to be rebooted. Never.
Don't say that.
No, I don't. There's no. How would you even do it? There's no way.
By keeping Stallone involved and calling it Creed.
That's not a reboot. It's a continuation. Those are like sequels.
I guarantee you, Rocky will be remade in our lifetime. I can't see how it's not being one of the more popular films of all time.
It won't be with Stallone. Stallone has rights to those.
I understand that. Stallone's in the 70s, though, so we'll see.
Doesn't mean nothing. He can live another 20, 30 years, bro.
Don't think it's going to happen.
And you can put it in the clause, even if I die, you don't remake it.
It's not how it works, though. So, no, but it brings up an interesting point because we don't really get a lot of sports movies in today's climate. We just don't. So the whole emphasis on sports, especially individual sports like martial arts, where it's physical, it's one-on-one. The outcome is completely based on you and how you respond. It's not a team effort where you can contribute to the team, but the team wins or loses. You don't get that blunt level honesty. And while Best of the Best, I think, is a watchable film, I fully admit it's not a good film at all. It's a poor film. Because it's really schlocky, it's really pasted together with stuff that didn't take a lot of thought or effort. However, it's done well enough, and it seems, I think the word I'm looking for is sincere enough where you can buy it, that you're going, okay, I'll watch it. And even if you don't put a lot of depth or emotion into it because the characters are fairly wooden and all that, and America wins like we always do, especially in the end when it counts, you can chalk them and go, wow, it's just an 80s schlocky film. But one film you and I did talk about that I thought really was a lot better than this, but kind of is very similar in a personal sort of sense. So that would be Vision Quest. Great film. We cared about the character, but it was a life story with something that he did in it. This movie doesn't come near the level of something like it. However, in the 80s, you had sports films and even little niche things before the X Games. We had like Gleaming the Cube we've talked about some other ones too. It was a really fun time in the 80s because there was a lot of emphasis placed on sports, and a lot of people played team sports and individual sports, and it's not really as popular, I think, in today's culture. So I don't know if we call the young people today Zoomers, but or millennials, but whatever, Generation Z. But I think what's sad about watching Best of the Best is realizing that, oh my God, we don't even have something of Best of the Best like today, do we?
No. Like I said, even though they're doing a lot of these reboots, a lot of these movies that were not big hits are getting overshadowed. And you probably could redo the story, and even though it's a reboot, it could be better. We've seen that with our movies where reboots are better than the originals.
Yes.
It doesn't happen always, but sometimes it does. Best of Best with a bigger budget. Who knows? If you got this, I mean, obviously the story is what you're there for, but if your production value, is really low, it really does hurt it. This movie, had a budget of $5 million, but I don't think it really brought in anything. Really, I think it brought in 1.7 million was the box office. So even back then, well, 5 million was I guess 5 to 10 million is average, I guess, for movies back in the 80s, depending what it is. I mean, I forget what this is the SVS company or Kai's Entertainment. So I don't think it was a really popular production company. So it may have not got did it get a theater? Do you remember if this just got a theatrical release?
Oh, this is in theaters. Absolutely. Best of the
What
best.
was it? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, because I asked because there were movies starting with the 90s. Because we got the VHS and all that stuff. They started going into, straight to VHS.
Yep.
And obviously the next ones did go to, I don't think they went to DVD or went to theaters like Best of Best 2. I think they went to, VHS. Because I remember seeing them on Blockbuster walls and stuff. But
yeah, well, overall, like I say, not a good film,
Yeah.
but watchable. It definitely feels like an 80s film. If that's something that you enjoy, check it out. Let us know what you think about it. What final thoughts do you have?
It almost feels like this could have been a Chuck Norris movie. A little bit. Either Chuck Norris or Seagal.
Probably more Chuck, I'd say, than Seagal, but
yeah, Seagal will turn into a crime thing.
Yeah, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Eric Roberts starring in Best of the Best 1989, an 80s film, America Undefeated. Check it out. All the commies have left the room, I see. That's good, because she would have been wiped out with one Eric Roberts sweeping roundhouse kick or something. I don't know. But choke him out, Eric. That's how you do it. So root for the Russians. No, for the Americans. And if we don't win, it's a shame, because it's 1, 2, 3. Kicks you out, especially if you're Korean at the old karate game. There you go. On that note, thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good night. As always, stay extreme.